I found translated into English. Sunnah.com, no offense to whoever is behind Sunnah.com, but they translated as Joariya. They translate Joariya, which does not have anything to do with sexual intercourse, the root word as I mentioned before, or Jariya, which comes from Jariya, but they translate it as concubines in English. But the Arabic word doesn't mean concubine. There's no concubine in the Arabic word. Because it doesn't make any sense. Because it says Aisha had a ghulam and a Jariya. So Aisha, Rada Anha, Aisha had a concubine? It's using the same Arabic word. The same Arabic word used. Well, Aisha has a concubine? It's ridiculous. And yet the word is, whoever translates our hadith, we need a major overhaul of the translations. Major overhaul of the English translations. Another one. So, Amat, or Amma. Again in the hadith, translated as concubine. I could just refute that simply by pointing out that there's a name for a Muslim woman, Amatullah, means slave of God. Or female slave of God. But if Amat means concubine, what? Does Amatullah mean concubine of God? It's ridiculous. Of course, I can refute that simply by pointing to, it says that it refers to people who are servants, who themselves have servants. And the servants, a female servant, has a female servant, Amat. Amat as it's used, which I think is just an idiomatic use of the term, Amat. So, can a female servant have a concubine? Doesn't make sense. It's absurd. Amat. There. Right. But yet, it's translated into English translations as concubine. I don't know why. Some people say, At-Tasarrar is also has been. I noticed that it has been translated in the Hadith. At-Tasarrar to say concubine or to take a concubine, but it doesn't mean that at all, because At-Tasarrar is not a noun; it's a verb, and what it actually describes is having a discrete, consensual relationship with a. Actually, just means it just means something discrete and to confide, secret, and conceal. That's all it means. It doesn't mean concubine at all. But it's used it was used in this particular hadith for someone who wanted to have a consensual relationship outside of marriage, so a discrete relationship with someone who was not his wife but was was a servant and consented to it. But again, At-Tasarrar does not mean concubine. It's not a noun, it's a verb. It means to basically take something secretly or indiscreetly, to have something discreetly. This is very important. Again, I just repeated it there, what I said. There is no word in the Quran or the Hadith for concubine. Doesn't exist. As a concept, to have a female servant for just intercourse is not an Islamic concept and was not understood by classical Islamic jurists and so on. It was a much later idea which was noticed from Romans, from obviously Chinese civilization, the idea of a courtesan or a person who was a servant but was used only specifically for intercourse. That's not an Islamic concept at all whatsoever. We see that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ actually encouraged people to marry, consensually again, female servants, not take them as in discrete relationships and so on and so forth, but to marry them. Always encourage them to marry them. A person who has, again, the English translation is slave girl, but it doesn't say amati. So a person who has a jariya and educates her and treats her nicely and then frees her and marries her will get a double reward. So it's encouraging people to marry women who, whether they are free or whether they are indentured servants. Again, in the Quran, it says, and marry the unmarried among you and the righteous among your male servants and female servants. It's encouraging marriage, consenting marriage, not people to take relationships outside of marriage, even if they are the same. Again, another verse saying the same thing, to marry, encouraging people to marry those women and men amongst them, and including women who are which are jariya, so which are people who are indentured servants. Now, the word concubine, I'll make this very clear. Concubine comes from the Latin word concubina, which means a woman who dwells with a man or has sexual intercourse with a man outside of marriage, or a woman of lower social status who dwells with a man or has sexual intercourse with a man of higher status. There is no Islamic concept of concubinage, but I always find it quite maybe hilarious. The Roman definition of concubine would actually apply to anyone who has a boyfriend or a girlfriend, because you can also be a concubinus, the male version. Anyone who has a girlfriend and boyfriend, and you're in a sexual relationship with them, you are a concubine or a concubinus, according to the Romans. According to the Romans, not me at all, to the Romans. So if you don't like concubines, then I suppose the Romans would expect you to get married to avoid that. So if you don't like concubines, and we want to avoid the Roman definition of it, then get married and not have extramarital affairs or premarital affairs. So anyway, that's it really. And because I know that was going to be the first question out of someone's lips about what about concubines? So dealt with that. Now I can take your questions, comments, and I also respect and encourage contention. So if you disagree with anything I've said, please challenge.